Oftentimes in the wake of school shootings, such as those that occurred at Columbine High School or Sandy Hook Elementary School a little more recently, people look for answers to two major questions. One, what caused this to happen? And two, why did it happen? Now, the first question, the national media often blames on video games. They often say that the individual that committed the crime had a history of playing violent video games and a history of interaction with violent video games, and that's what made them violent to commit this crime. And that's just an unfair statement to make. Yeah, video games on a whole is a highly interactive entertainment art form, much more interactive than movies or books can be. So it's easy to see why you might claim that playing these violent video games would cause you to become violent, because you're actually playing it out. You know, when you press a button on your controller, your character throws a punch or shoots a gun or something. But with the studies that have been done, and the way the video game industry is set up on the idea of educating consumers, and really just plain old logic, you can see that it's a very flawed argument, that video games can't be the culprit here. So the idea that video games cause violence is one that's been studied very extensively in the field of psychology. Hundreds of papers have been written over the idea. One that really stands out, though, is a 2010 paper published in the Review of General Psychology, Volume 14, by Patrick Markey of Villanova and his wife, Charlotte Markey of Rutgers University. And they found two key things in this paper. The first was that the individuals that committed violent crimes and had a past of interacting with video games were oftentimes either self-described or described by others around them as being extremely angry, mean, depressed, psychotic, unruly, anxious, aggressive, or hateful. And this was before video games. So it kind of showed that oftentimes this individual had a pre-existing mental state that pushed them to commit these crimes and commit these acts. Another thing that this study found was that oftentimes the papers that claimed there was a connection did so on flawed logic. They oftentimes didn't take into account the shooter's previous mental state, or there were oftentimes internal biases within the study that could invalidate the results from a scientific standpoint. It's a great, those studies become great headline getters, but when you look at the methodology of them, they're conducted all wrong. And so you can't say the results are true. Something else to consider with video games is that in 1994, in response to kind of a slew of violent video games being released, the Entertainment Software Ratings Board, or ESRB for short, was established. And what this board is responsible for doing is rating video games similar to the way movies are rated. If you take a look at this diagram that I have here, you can see we have category that's E for everyone, category that's T for teen, category that's M for mature. This is a small subsection of its 6 categories the ESRB uses. But these are your major 3, and you're going to find these on the front of every video game case, whatever the game is rated. So everyone, if a game's rated E for everyone, that's similar to your PG movies. It's suitable for the whole family to go to. You might have some minimal cartoon violence, that kind of stuff, but nothing real major. Anything rated T for teen is going to be similar to a PG-13 movie. And according to the ESRB, for a game to be rated teen, it has to contain some violence, suggestive themes, crude humor, minimal blood, simulated gambling, or infrequent use of strong language. So it's very much like a PG-13 movie. And then finally, you have the category that's M for mature. And this is where, to be categories like this, the ESRB is looking for intense violence, blood and gore, sexual content, or strong language. And this is very similar to your rated R movies. This is certainly something you have to be 17 or older to be able to purchase, just like being able to purchase a rated R movie ticket. And oftentimes this isn't something you want to be given to a 12 or 13-year-old. So the purpose of this is to help educate individuals that are out purchasing games to understand what kind of content is there. At a glance on the cover, you can see who is this suitable for. And then, finally, if you just look at the logic and at some of the numbers that go into the video game industry, it doesn't make sense that that video games could be responsible for violent shootings. According to a recent study done by the Entertainment Software Association, 59% of Americans play video games. 51% of Americans own their own home console. That's 1 out of every 2. So that's, you figure a country the size of the United States, that's about 160 million people. In addition, looking at 2013's most popular video games based on units sold, 7 of the top 10 contain violence of some sort. And they all combine to sell, something like 40 million units. And then just looking at popular franchises such as Halo and Call of Duty that have combined sold well over 200 million units all time. It's a lot of violent video games out there on the market. But really, these violent crimes, especially these school shootings, aren't all that common. But you would think there's all these violent video games out there, and if violent video games that cause violent behavior, we should see a spike in these violent acts. A substantial one, not just something that could be attributed to a growing population. But there is no spike. There is no reason to suggest that there is correlation. And finally, if you just look at it from a standpoint of like a professional athlete, a lot of younger professional athletes, especially 28 and under, tend to play a lot of video games in their downtime, at least many of them. And oftentimes they'll play sports games. And a lot of times they'll play sports games that simulate the sport they are a professional in. But you don't hear these athletes, and you don't give credit to athletes for being these great professional athletes worthy of making millions of dollars a year because they spend multiple hours a day playing video games. It's not a connection we make. We don't assume that you can become a great athlete by playing video games. But we like to assume that you can become a violent individual by playing violent video games. And to me, that's a very unjust connection to make. As has been mentioned, if you look at the psychological studies that have been done, as well as the way the video game industry is set up, and just really sit down and think about it, and not let emotions guide what we're talking about and the decisions we make, we'll see that video games really aren't behind violent crimes such as school shootings or homicides. Thank you.